Hey, welcome into Warchant TV, and I'm joined by managing editor Ira Schofel, the great one. Ira, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to
And
be here.
hey, got to give you some glory. Corey tries to hog it all up all the time, so we got to spread it around a little bit.
That's what he does.
Yeah, yeah. So got all the good stuff going on. As you see below me, if you are not a Warchant subscriber, you can do that for 30 days. It's absolutely free. And you know what? You're going to probably get to hear about a couple football games. You'll see our coverage of that because we're less than 2 weeks, believe it or not, to Florida State kicking off. So it's getting real, Ira. This is exciting. And also, if you're just on YouTube, make sure you subscribe there. Underneath Ira, you'll see a little podcast. And if you like the podcast, this is a video. Hit the thumbs up for us. That really helps us out. But this is going to be part 2 of our depth chart kind of review. And we did a part 1 on offense last week. And if you want to see that, I'm going to put a little video at the end. You'll see there's a little thing that pops up, or you can go to warchant.com and search it on YouTube if you want to see our rundown of the offense. But today, we're going on the defensive side of the ball. And this was a little warning ahead of time. There's some difficult stuff in here. We are not out of practice like we normally are. We can see the position groups and who's lining up where. So we're trying to piece this together from what we hear, what the coaches and players are telling us. So it's our best guess effectively, but we'll still do our best. And I will start out with the defensive tackle, which wasn't that difficult, Ira. That was the one I go, okay, this is pretty easy going through defensive tackle. And things I want to point out too, and you can read the full write-up on warchant.com, and I'll put the link under this if you want to read the whole write-up. It amazed me when I looked at the two big ones, and that's Marvin Wilson. Pro Football Focus, when they do the grades for these guys, he's the only returning interior defensive lineman in all the country that had a 90-plus grade that's back. And then the other one, Corey Durden, is the leading interior defensive lineman that's back with the most pressures from last season. So that's a pretty good 1-2 punch, but there's more after that, Ira. It's not just a two-trick pony, man. This is a really deep unit.
Yeah, it really is. And so much so that, Corey Durden is coming back from an injury, an off-season surgery. And so he didn't practice full go in the early part of camp. And Fabian Lovett was getting a lot of those reps along with Robert Cooper. And both of them have been huge performers so far in camp and really impressed everybody. So, Corey Durden, I think, is as you said, is in that front line with Marvin Wilson. But they're 3 deep. I mean, they are 3 deep at defensive tackle legitimately. I think you're going to see all those guys rotating a lot.
Yeah, and then if we you're right. True Thompson's in the probably third team, and he started a bowl game. So, you got some nice depth there. And I know if you follow Florida State football, Odell will like to rotate guys because, that position wears you down. So depth is really important to have there. And let's move over to the other one, which, again, is very easy to come up with who we expect to start at the 2 defensive end spots. And now we're assuming they're going to be mostly in a 4-3, unlike last year. So, it's very clear. Janarius Robinson and then Josh Kando, who has been the talk of camp and the guy that got to break the rock. And he had a story on warchant.com about that, which is pretty cool. The cool video and stuff of that doing. That's a nice little tradition that they had here. But, Ira, after that, it gets pretty murky. There's absolutely literally, I think I counted 9 snaps or something the entire rest of the unit has had at Florida State. So it's anybody's guess. A lot of young promising guys, but man, I don't know who's going to be next up after those 2.
Yeah, it is a little dicey there. We'll see. You don't want to say that these younger guys can't do it. In fact, Derek McClendon is a guy who we saw a little bit last season. He played in a few games last season, but kept his red shirt. And then we also saw him in the few days of spring practice that were open before COVID-19 kind of shut everything down. And he's obviously got really good athletic ability. He was a kind of a impressive pass rusher coming out of Atlanta. Josh Griffiths has gotten a lot of attention in preseason camp. Quashon Fuller, I think, has impressed some people. So they have some bodies. They have some guys that have potential. But you're right. Other than Janarius Robinson and Josh Kando, they don't have anybody who's done anything really at the college level.
Well, here's what you hope: those guys can stay healthy, and these guys at times can get in there and get experience as the season goes on. Hopefully by midseason, you got a couple guys that can at least get in there, get some reps, and make some contributions to that unit. The one little thing I want, before we move on to the linebackers, I was talk about some of the new kind of position names that Adam Fuller's brought here. One of those is the Fox position, which is pretty neat. That sounds that's mostly Janarius Robinson. It sounds like it's just a hybrid. I think it's more of like you see sometimes a stand-up type linebacker. He's going to rush the passer. He's going to set the edge, but also he's going to at times, drop back into coverage and serve like a linebacker.
Yeah, and he got to do some of that last year, and I think showed some ability to do that. He's really athletic, and he's got some ability to do that. And then, I think they have a couple other guys that will, have shown some potential. Josh Griffiths is a guy who that's a new thing for him. He didn't do it much in high school, but he's been working it as well. That that I'm curious to see how successful they are in that. Florida State did that some last year with mixed results. So we'll see how much better they are at this time around. But yeah, that is something that Adam Fuller likes to do with his defensive ends.
In this position, we're going to talk about linebackers here in a minute, but these are the two positions that I think massively underachieved the last couple of years and really didn't do much. They were actually a weak link on the team. I mean, I looked, and I think the defensive ends combined had 5 sacks all season. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's unheard of. You had units get 5 sacks in a game, an entire season. That's all they did. So linebackers is kind of the same thing, a group that really kind of underachieved. But I will say, and I wrote about this before, the 3 main guys we're going to talk about that we think are going to be kind of the mainstays or the starters here, they did show improvement. You know, they looked eyeball tests, and if you go in the Pro Football Focus grades, they all look better and they all perform better down the stretch. And the 3 I'm talking about, of course, Emmett Rice, Leonard Warner, and then Amari Gaynor. But, you know, kind of similar to defensive ends, Ira, you know, we're kind of like after that, you've heard some really good things about guys like, you know, Steven Dix. I know DeKalen Brooks had a really nice scrimmage the other day, but, man, it's just – there's a lot of young guys and a lot of question marks after those first 3.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the summer. Over the season. I think this is a position where you really have a lot of experience in Leonard Warner and Emmett Rice, as you said, and Amari Gaynor, but there's so much hype about some of those young guys, as you said, Steven Dix, Jalen McCluster, Kevon Glenn. There's some really talented young guys that Kalen DeLoach that we think are going to get on the field. So I think early on you would expect they're going to go with that experience especially because all those guys have done a really good job of taking ownership of the position. They've been real leaders. But I think as the season goes on, you're going to see them sprinkle in some of those younger guys. And that'll be one of the fun things to watch with this defense is how do they mix in some of those young talented guys as the season goes on.
And then once again, we get thrown a little bit of a curveball with some of the terminology. And I know this is Corey's favorite position. The stud is in there. And we've heard Amari Gaynor's holding that down. And I guess the best description of it, it's another hybrid. You know, you're kind of a linebacker / safety, but it's got to be. And the other thing too, is I think Adam Fuller mentions also a guy that's going to blitz. So I think this is kind of a jack of all trades position. You got to be able to do everything on the field. So I think this is a nice instance where Amari Gaynor seems to be that guy. If you go back and look, especially his high school thing, a tremendous blitzer. He can get after the quarterback, athletic enough to get sideline to cover. So, I mean, it seems like this is a perfect fit for Amari.
Yeah, it seems like kind of the position that, we would have seen before with, Jalen Ramsey or LaMarcus Joyner, Derwin James, those guys that are physical enough that can play closer to the line of scrimmage but can really play well in space and come off the edge as a pass rusher. I think that's where Amari Gaynor gets a chance to really shine. I don't think his strong suit is going to be getting in the box, taking on blockers, trying to fight through a lineman to get to the ball carrier. He's a guy you want in space, and I think this is a position where he'll really get to use his skills.
All right, we mentioned defensive tackle early on and how deep that was, but I mean, if there's a group that might rival it, it's the defensive backfield. I mean, they're just loaded with depth, loaded with experience. A bunch of guys. I think the four guys coming back started at least 5 games last season, so that's really impressive there, Ira. And the talk of camp, besides maybe Kane Doe, is Travis Jay, how well he's played, out of Madison County. So he's made a real strong case for himself at one of those safety positions. So, I'm thinking across the board, assuming Hamza is healthy, I mean, he's got to be on the field. I mean, Cyrus Fagan is in there, Travis Jay, and then the corners. Obviously, Asante is going to be there. Who do you think is going to line up at that other cornerback spot, Ira?
That's going to be interesting. I mean, I think they got some really good competition. Akeem Dent, from everything we've heard, really got off to a great start in preseason camp, and he's so happy. You could see it when we talked to him, how much happier he is back at corner as opposed to being at safety where he was last year mostly. But then you bring in the transfers, Miko Dotson, Jarian Jones from Mississippi State. I think what's going to be interesting with that position is I think you're going to see a lot of different packages. Asante Samuel and some of the guys mentioned that Adam Fuller's got a lot of different packages. To me, this is almost going to be like a basketball team with the secondary, like trying to find ways to kind of rotate guys in to get everybody enough shots to feel like they're really contributing, because from everything we've heard, that position has just been incredible in preseason camp.
Who is it? One of them said we have packages on packages.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the players said that. So I think that's part of the thing too. And there's a lot of cross training going on there. So when you look, if you're on Warchant, you see our actual projected depth chart. I'm admitting there's a lot of guesswork there, because you're going to see different, like Ira said, different times you're going to see guys line up in totally different positions and different packages and formations. And then we throw in another weird position, and this one is the buck. which is, again, I'd say, I guess it's a defensive back / linebacker here that's kind of filling that role. And again, who's the one guy in the team, Ira, that's played a ton there at the two positions? Well, Lars-Woodbey.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, it seems like the nice thing is you've got these weird kind of position names that are hybrids, but Florida State seems to have the right guys to fill those roles.
Yeah, and I think it was Cyrus Fagan who made that comment about the packages.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
And, he's a perfect example of a guy who played a lot last year, ended up starting some games late in the season and played well, was productive. But then you start looking and you start asking yourself, okay, where exactly does he fit?
Yeah.
But when you talk to him, he didn't seem concerned about it at all. He said they've got plenty of different ways to get us on the field. We didn't even mention guys like Raymond Woody and Brendan Gant. I mean, there's a lot of guys in that secondary who can really play. And one thing that I think it might have been Cyrus that mentioned is one thing Adam Fuller is doing is trying to figure out which DBs play well with each other. And I think that kind of goes into those packages, how they complement each other. Now, when you get in the heat of the battle, I don't know how much time you can spend figuring out, well, this guy fits better with this guy or that guy. But we'll have to see. But they certainly have a ton of options in the secondary.
I'd say I'm really excited when they get on the field just to see those personnel groupings in the secondary. It's going to be fun. Pro Football Focus grade is going to be great to see the snap counts of everybody, because I think you're going to see a lot more, like you mentioned, all these guys a little bit more spread across the thing. I don't think you're going to see one guy getting 80 snaps. I think you're going to have a lot of different combinations, and maybe that's good early on. They can kind of see what works and what doesn't. So exciting stuff. We expect a significant improvement on the defensive side of the football, because when we went through this, man, we talked about a lot of players with experience and a lot of talent there. So, Adam Fuller, a little pressure on you, man. You got to pick that thing up a little bit. But I guess it's got nowhere to go up from being ranked number 90 last year. So that's the positive for that defense.
Yeah, there's no question. I think, there's a little bit of a question mark, I think, as we said earlier, defensive end. And in terms of depth, we hope, you like to think that Josh Kando is the guy that they've been talking about, and that you've got some guys behind them that can step up and make some plays. And then a linebacker, there's a lot of options. But we've seen Leonard Warner, Amari Gaynor, and Emmett Rice play in the past, and it hasn't been a dominant group. So you hope that the better coaching is going to raise their level of play. So those are still some questions. But you talk about the defensive front, the defensive tackle, the secondary. It's a lot of good pieces to work with.
Yeah, no doubt. So good stuff, Ira. Thanks for your time today. And again, if you haven't seen it, we've got the offensive video to go through that, and also you can read that on warchant.com. So check it out. We got a full week going on. We'll start practice coverage begins again on Tuesday. Am I right, Ira? Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. We'll be back on Tuesday, and then they're starting a Georgia Tech preparation. Everything up until now has been preseason camp type stuff, fundamentals, basics. This week they're going to start really working on Georgia Tech and all the matchups there.
Exciting. So that means we got to start preparing to do the Warchant report for next week. We'll have that back with everybody, and might have to do it this way, Zoom, but we'll have it for you, no doubt, and preparing for Georgia Tech. It's fun. We're actually talking football. Thanks for your time, buddy.
Thanks, Gene. We'll talk soon.
And check that out, Warchant 30-day. Warchant 30 is the code. Give us the thumb up. Come on, you can do that down there, and subscribe to Warchant. Thanks, guys.